Chapter 6: A Series of Catastrophes. After the German scientists' affair, the Mossad was on a roll. Meyer Amit brought in more professionals from the military, introduced new technologies, and strengthened links with intelligence services abroad. He also continued to set in motion numerous organizational reforms. Amit wanted to establish a single operations division in the Mossad, which would bring all of the units dealing with sabotage, targeted killings, and espionage in the Arab countries under one umbrella. Read poorly. In order to do this, Amit did what Harl had tried to do for years, and he, Amit, had opposed. He transferred Unit 188 from Amman to the Mossad and merged it with Shamir's Mifrats. Yosef Yariv was appointed head of the division, with Shamir as his deputy. The Mossad chief named the division Caesarea, after the Roman city on the Mediterranean coast, another example of the Israeli intelligence community's penchant for code names taken from the country's ancient history. The network of Caesarea's activities outside of Israel was codenamed the Senate. Amit also wanted his own intelligence division. Until recently, the same unit, the Birds, had served both the Shin Bet and the Mossad. Amit now decided that he wanted to separate the unit and would work only outside of Israel and only for the Mossad. He co-opted some of the Birds' unit's personnel for a new intelligence unit, which he named Colossus. In addition to these bureaucratic changes, under Amit, the agency carried out operations that garnered unprecedented amounts of information about the Arab states and their military services. One of the most outstanding of these was Operation Diamond, in which Junction recruited an Iraqi pilot, Munir Redfa, who defected to Israel with his brand new MiG-21 fighter plane, the most advanced and threatening attack weapon in the hands of the Soviet bloc at the time. The Israeli Air Force was now able to prepare to cope with its most powerful adversary in future aerial combat. The Pentagon was very eager to learn the secrets of the plane, and Amit gave the Americans not just the blueprints for the MiG, but the plane itself, fully equipped and with a trained pilot. That's just badass. Amit had also assiduously cultivated Israel's secret relations with Morocco, in line with periphery doctrine. Though Morocco was an Arab country in close contact with Israel's main enemies, it also was moderate and had no territorial dispute with Israel. Furthermore, its leader was probably pro-Western, Furthermore, its leader was the relatively pro-Western King Hassan II. Morocco received valuable intelligence and technological assistance from Israel, and in exchange, Hassan allowed Morocco's Jews to emigrate to Israel, and the Mossad received the right to establish a permanent station in the capital, Rabat, from which it could spy on Arab countries. The height of the cooperation came in September of 1965, when the king allowed a Mossad team led by Zevi Malkin and Rafi Eitan to bug all the meeting rooms and private suites of the leaders of the Arab states and their military commanders during Arab Summit in Casablanca. The purpose of the summit was to discuss the establishment of a joint common Arab command in future wars with Israel. But King Hassan's relations with some of the other Arab rulers were shaky, and he feared that some of them were acting to depose him, so he let the Mossad listen in. This gave Israel an unprecedented glimpse of the military and intelligence secrets of its greatest enemies and of the mindsets of those countries' leaders. At that summit, commanders of the Arab armies reported that their forces were not prepared for a new war against Israel, information that was the basis of Israel's military's supreme confidence when they purged Prime Minister Eshkol to go to the war 2 years later in June 1967. I'm going to reread that whole long sentence because I was read too poorly. I'm just going to start with the whole paragraph. This gave Israel an unprecedented glimpse of the military and intelligence secrets of its greatest enemies. and of the mindsets of those countries' leaders. At that summit, commanders of the Arab armies reported that their forces were not prepared for a new war against Israel, information that was the basis of the Israeli military's supreme confidence when they urged Prime Minister Eshkol to go to war 2 years later, in June 1967. This sensational material, a Mossad report stated, was one of the highlights of the achievements of the Israeli intelligence since its foundation. These successful operations provided the IDF with the critical intelligence it needed to prepare for the next war. But then, at a dizzying pace, one catastrophe after another hit Amit and his organization. The top spy for Unit 188 and now Caesarea was Eli Cohen, who'd penetrated the ruling circles in Damascus and provided the information that enabled the Mossad to locate the Nazi Alois Brunner and send him a letter bomb. Cohen was originally assigned to serve as a sleeper agent who, rather than collect and convey information, would become active only if he had to alert Israel that Syria was planning to launch a surprise attack against it. However, under pressure from his operators and having become deeply enmeshed with and overconfident in his own cover story, he started broadcasting messages to his Mossad handlers on a daily basis, using a telegraphic device he'd kept hidden in his apartment. He reported on secret military installations, Syria's plot to control the region's water sources with the assistance of a Saudi contracting firm headed by Mohammed bin Laden, Osama's father, and Syria's relationship with the Soviet Union, but also on Nazis holed up in Damascus, parliamentary gossip, and accounts of government power struggles. Cohen's transmission of information of this nature and at this frequency was a serious and unprofessional error on his own part, but also, more important, on the part of his handlers. Eli Cohen was one of the people who went most... Eli Cohen was one of the people who went through life walking sideways, said Moti Kfer, who, among other Mossad jobs, served as head of its training program in the early 1960s. When you are sideways, sometimes you think that no one sees you, but he was wrong. He became too prominent. I told him during training, never be the life of the party, but he did the opposite. The letter bomb sent to Brunner and the lively interest that Cohen showed in other Nazis in talks. The letter bomb sent to Brunner and the lively interest that Cohen showed in other Nazis in talks with top Syrians, along with the fact that he was in an unusual situation, an immigrant without a job, who was giving parties, mixing with high society, and providing his guests and friends with entertainment of all kinds, yeah, that's not a spy, put the Syrian intelligence services on the alert and led one of his interlocutors to doubt the cover story of Kamal Amin Thabet, a wealthy Syrian merchant who'd returned to his homeland after long years of exile in Buenos Aires. In a tragic coincidence for Cohen, mind you, I need to stop doing that. In a tragic coincidence for Cohen, during the same period, his transmitter caused interference with broadcasts from the Syrian General Staff HQ across the street from the luxurious apartment he had rented, and in which he held with wild parties for Syrian high officials. It's fucking loud. Puzzled, the Syrians asked GRU, Soviet military intelligence, to investigate. The Russians sent in special prowl cars, which managed to lock into the signals emanating from Cohen's transmitter during one of his broadcasts. Cohen was arrested, brutally tortured, quickly tried, and sentenced to death. He was hanged in public in the central square of Damascus on May 18th. His body was left dangling on the gallows, draped in a white sheet bearing the text of his death sentence as a message to the State of Israel. The man who had recruited, trained, and operated Cohen Gedalia Khalaf later said, "I looked at him, at my Eli, on Syrian television, and I saw in his face the diabolical torments he had undergone. I didn't know what to do with myself. I wanted to scream, to do something, to take a pistol and break into the Mezza prison, to bang my head against the wall until it broke, until we could save him. And they killed him, and we could do nothing but stand there and watch." Amit's Mossad, so freshly confident, was humiliated, impotent. Worse, the Mossad was exposed. The Syrians had tortured Cohen so severely, yanking out his fuck all this. Damn. Yanking out his fingernails, electrifying his testicles, that he'd broken. He received the secret communication codes and deciphered 200 messages that he revealed the secret communications codes and deciphered 200 messages that he'd sent and the Syrians had picked up but hadn't been able to read. And he told them what he knew about Israelis' intelligence, recruitment, training, and cover-building methods. Read poorly. Shortly after Cohen was caught, Caesarea was hit by another disaster. Wolfgang Lutz, the Caesarian spy in Cairo's high society, a key element in the intelligence gathering for the attempts to kill the German scientists in Egypt, was also uncovered on February 10th, 1965. His downfall also came from excessive activity, overconfidence in his cover story, and a number of crude errors that he and his handlers had made. The only thing that saved Lutz from suffering the same fate as Eli Cohen was the intervention of the BND, the German espionage service, which responded to Israel's request and told the Egyptians that Lutz was also working for them. Lutz and his wife, Waltraud, were spared the gallows and sentenced to life in prison. They were later released on a prisoner exchange following the Six-Day War in 1967. But this was another hard blow for the Mossad. For fear of further losses, Yosef Yariv ordered his other spies whose training and cover stories had cost many years of effort to come home. Caesarea, barely out of its infancy, was nearly in ruins. Prime Minister Eshkol regarded the downfall of the two spies as a national disaster. But despite the bad state the Mossad was in, Eshkol decided to approve a special targeted killing mission by Caesarea in Uruguay. Anyway. 2 months prior, a conference attended by representatives of the various intelligence agencies had been held to discuss the state of the hunt for Nazis, a matter that was not high on the list of priorities. Rafi Medan, deputy chief of Al-Mal unit, which had handled the issue, surveyed the possible targets for assassination, on the list from which came the name of Otto Skorzeny. Had just been erased. When he came to the name of Herbert Kukurs, a Latvian Nazi war criminal who, as an aviator, had volunteered to assist the SS and the Gestapo and began describing his horrific acts, a loud thud was heard. The head of Amman, the military intelligence directorate, Major General Aharon Yariv, had collapsed, and it took some time before he came to. Kukurs, it emerged, had burned alive some of Yariv's relatives and friends.